and standards for English and math are provided per grade level to keep each state achieving at proximal levels. These allow teachers to make lessons plans under their discretion for appropriateness for specific classes. These standards track student progress and ensure readiness for college or workforce entry. Some key definitions are the Common Core Standards, which are a rigorous set of standards for the English language arts and mathematics curriculum that have been developed based on the best practices of schools and organizations around the country and the entire world. They're the culmination of an extended, broad-based effort to fulfill the charge issued by states to create the next generation of K-12 standards in order to help ensure that all students are college or career ready by the end of high school. College readiness is the combination of skills, knowledge, and habits of mind necessary to fully participate in college-level courses, be it the 100 level and above. International benchmarking refers to analyzing high-performing education systems and identifying ways to improve our own system based on those findings. One of the ways to analyze education systems is to compare the international assessments. The main goal is to increase college readiness or workforce entry. Since 2009, 48 states combined educational experts and government officials to design K-12 standards to improve this. These standards set guidelines but do not dictate to teachers what they have to teach. There are clear expectations and it's easy to track student progress. The goal is to provide proficiency in English and math, which will be through skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and analysis. The standards promote equity for student education. Common Core standards set by a wide arrangement of educational experts should be implemented in all publicly funded schools to ensure college readiness, track progress of students' achievements levels, and create globally competitive students. These standards set clear, concise expectations of what should be taught, but allows teachers to create and modify their individual lessons for the most success in their classroom. This modern system instills college readiness in each student despite income, region, or personal circumstance. Some characteristics of the Common Core are focus, a deeper, rigorous, and relevant content and application of knowledge through a higher order of 21st century thinking skills. Rigor, complex and challenging, and aligned with college or work expectations. Coherence, orderly progression, clear, consistent, and understandable for the student, the teacher, and the parents involved. Fluency, which is proficient and automatic. These are taken specifically from the California Standards site, which it just happens that California is one of the highest achieving public education systems in the U.S., which has also adopted the standards and benefited. The Common Core development has been around since 2000 when it was noticed that each state had their own standards and they weren't consistent across the states, which was providing discrepancy among the states. So in 2009, these national standards were drafted for clear and consistent within the states. There were cooperation between the National Education Association, American Federation of Teachers, National Councils of Teachers of Mathematics, and English. Thank you. I now stand for questioning.
All right, my first question, Jamie, is how do the standards apply to areas other than math and English? You said Common Core standards focus on readiness in math and English, but what happens to the science and social studies classes?
As of right now, these standards are focused on English and math because they're the lowest achieving on college readiness benchmarks, including the ACT and the SAT. But like with the English skills, they're also carried over into other subjects like social studies.
Is the ACT one of the major factors that we're determining this lack of college readiness from in high school students across America?
Absolutely it was.
Is the main focus of these Common Core standards on college readiness rather than actual material guidelines that have to be covered in high school?
Well, I think that the ACT is one of the only standardized tests that provide this college readiness and what material has been covered in high school classes. So while I I do think that the ACT was a major part. I think that the ACT capstones the materials that need to be covered to prepare for college.
You mentioned it promotes student educational equity among students. How is one state raised without lowering the other? And what happens to more gifted students if you're promoting student equity, the students that need more enrichment in class, or maybe the students that need more help? How do you achieve that equity?
Well, no state is forced to adopt the Common Cores as of yet, but no state is expected to lower their standards. So high achieving states like California or Massachusetts will not have to lower their standards, while they can keep their own modification within each standard. So it can be fitting toward the state and how they plan to achieve these enrichment programs you talk about.
Hello, my name is Grant Briers, and I'll be speaking against the implementation of Common Core curriculum standards in the United States education system. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of the negative. I'd like to define a few terms for you real quick before I start my debate. Core curriculum is a curriculum in which all or some of the subjects or courses are based on a central theme in order to correlate the subjects and the theme. And the Common Core Standards Initiative is an education initiative in the United States that details what K-12 students should know in English, language arts, and mathematics at the end of each grade. The initiative is sponsored by the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers and seeks to establish consistent education standards across the states, as well as to ensure that students graduating from high school are prepared to enter credit-bearing courses at 2- or 4-year college programs or enter the workforce. With the job market and economy becoming increasingly global, it has become a worldwide competition to produce the most well-educated students, a competition in which the United States has fallen behind other nations. This has led the United States to take action, even if it's not the most effective action, in order to say it did something to improve the education system rather than be accused of doing nothing. I intend to prove that the Common Core Standards Initiative is not only counterproductive to advancements, but is a piece of legislation that significantly erodes control and hinders a teacher's ability to teach, creates a set of standards that are far from rigorous, and was passed by states essentially by bribery in the form of federal funds. The implementation of Common Core standards is detrimental to the future of education in the United States. The initiative is geared more towards career preparation and college readiness than educational advancement, and was modeled after other countries rather than uniquely designed. And it engages in a one-size-fits-all approach to education that is simply impractical. Common Core finds a middle ground by creating this broad set of standards for every state. In some states, the standards are an improvement, but in other states, they're a step backwards. The Obama administration's Race to the Top program essentially bribed states into adopting these standards. There were $4.35 billion in federal taxpayer funds, and basically states had to adopt the standards and receive no funds. Smaller states with not a large budget don't have the power to say no to these kind of funds. Otherwise, their education would just deteriorate. The educational guidelines were, in most cases, never voted on by Congress, the Department of Education, or local school boards. Rather, they were signed off at a state executive level in order to receive the federal funds in one broad pen stroke. The standards revolve more around competition among other nations and raising test scores than a genuine desire to create a reform that would improve the education system. It's all about making those test scores better and saying that United States students are better prepared for college. While Jamie mentioned earlier that the standards allow teachers to teach as they please, I believe that these standards still, the parameters set for teachers, keep them restrained from being able to go outside the guidelines and teach more or teach less, or what they have to do for their individual classroom. Some things just don't, you have to be adjusted for the individual class. The standards focus on a flooding of information to students in order to outperform students of other countries. Because the standards revolve so much around raising ACT scores and things like that, it's just a focus on a flood of information of math concepts and English concepts and how to better interpret charts and graphs and things like that, just so they can raise those test scores. Knowledge of material is surely essential and important to the educational process, but creativity, which is influenced by a teacher's individual lessons plans, is the most important thing to create advancements in science, art, literature, and business. Teaching no longer requires innovation with these standards, but only requires to be able to read from these lesson plans. It will create a lack of interest in education among students. More gifted students will be forced into mediocrity. Education should be tailored to the individual, and every American does not need to know trigonometry. If they want to focus on career readiness, send someone who doesn't care about math onto a vocational center. Teachers have to focus on meeting these standards rather than teaching, and teaching is something that can't be measured by statistics.
So Grant, a big point that you had made was stressing that these states do not have the ability to modify the plans after specifically stating that no state will have to lower their standards and that they can tailor that according to their state expectations. Do you still believe this?
I think these standards are still going to force some. If you set these standards, it's going to force states into changing some things about their education system.
So you had talked about a one-size-fits-all policy, but as I had read earlier that I had taken from the California Standards say about focus, rigor, coherence, and fluency that were modeled off the Common Core but adapted to their specific state, can you just elaborate on how this is a one-size-fits-all policy?
You continually emphasized educational equity among students. And so to create that equity, you're going to have to place every student with the same material, the same teaching, the same assignments to create that equity. And then students that need more help are going to be pushed harder, and that's good because you're going to teach those students and they're going to improve. But the students that are already at a higher level are going to be forced down.
So students, I just want to elaborate that on students in a state, say like ours, West Virginia, where income may not be as high and education standards aren't as well. How would you approach the promoting equity among students like us who are higher achieving but cannot reach out to that further, like the Massachusetts or California level without standards like these?
I say you can raise those standards, but I think it's important to keep focus on the students that want to push farther and achieve more in high school. Because West Virginia, just because it's a rural state, doesn't mean you don't have a lot of very intelligent people in the state that want to push themselves. And it's important to maintain funding and focus on these AP classes, honors classes, and talented and gifted programs. So consistently throughout K through 12, these students are receiving the enrichment they need.
So these standards were based on, as I had said earlier, the American Federations of Teachers, the National Education Association, and have the Common Core has proved that they have increased test scores in every state adopted. 44 states adopted, 4 territories, DC, and the Department of Defense Education Activity have all adopted the Common Core. And it has proved, research and evidence-based, that scores have improved as well as college readiness. While they are based off of strengths of current state standards, no state has to lower these expectations, and they're based on the top 2 scoring countries, and these expectations are aligned with success and work rigor. They outline set goals but don't specify how to teach them. For example, in English, some English guidelines are like literacy and history or science texts as well, but they focus on writing skills, grammar, listening skills, and critically analyzing literature. There's cognitive reasoning and evidence collection skills that will have to be used later on in college courses. And English standards are based for life outside the classroom. An example of one of the specific standards is analyze how particular elements of a story or drama interact. As well as going on to math standards, they provide specificity rather than broad topics. They stress conceptual ideas, but also refer back to arithmetic strategies that, like addition, or that will have to be used in like balancing a checkbook. They're based on top achieving international models for each specific subject. An example of one of these is use data from a sample survey to estimate a population mean or proportion, develop a margin of error through simulation and models of random sampling. International benchmarking, the company Achieve compares the international achievement levels to U.S. for the betterment of their students, and they're based on the highest achieving math countries, including Singapore, Japan, Korea, Finland, and Canada.
Okay. A major issue with these Common Core standards is that a lot of states didn't really have much choice in whether or not to adopt them or whether or not they wanted to keep their own state choices in the education system, because the Obama administration's Race to the Top program offered $4.35 billion in taxpayer funds to go to the states that adopted these standards. Smaller states like West Virginia that don't have a lot of state income aren't going to be able to turn down such a massive amount of funds to go towards their education system. It's either adopt the standards or tell the West Virginia public that they turned down all this money to improve the education system.